More reaction on the budget. With me in studio, our economic contributor, Ayabonga Kawe. Also, Kubano Gumbi, our business reporter. Plenty of numbers. They're going through graphs. I don't understand any of it. They tell me that they do. So they'll be explaining it to you, hopefully in small words, as we go through the afternoon. Let's get some reaction from business now. The CEO of B4SA is Martin Kingston. He wears many other hats in the business environment as well. Martin, good afternoon to you. Firstly, your first reaction to the budget. Is it going to help business? And obviously there's a reduction in the amount of tax that business may end up paying.
Stephen, good afternoon. I think it is going to improve confidence levels. Of that, there's absolutely no doubt. Fundamentally, it's dependent upon whether or not the reforms that the minister spoke about are going to be implemented. We've had an absolutely key focus on the need for implementation. And there are some very aggressive, I would suggest, assumptions in terms of growth projections so that we can bring down the deficit, cap off the level of debt to GDP ratios in the next 3 to 4 years. Let's hope they become a reality. I also think that it's absolutely correct that the minister emphasized the need to roll out the vaccine as quickly and as comprehensively as possible, because that's going to enable us to bring the economy back to full capacity as quickly as possible, without the risk, obviously, of future waves, which we're expecting this year and potentially even next year.
Government debt supposed to stabilise in the 2025-2026 financial year. It's a curiously specific percentage we've been given. 88.9% is what they said in the budget. Is it really possible to do that? I mean, I know there's been some good news on the revenue side, but we're still in a very dire financial position.
Well, we're growing revenue and we're trying to limit any increase in expenditure. But as the minister said, we have to avert a sovereign debt crisis. I think that historically we've seen that these projections have actually not been as accurate as they were predicted to be at the time that they were tabled in front of Parliament. 89% debt, or approximately 89% debt to GDP, is very high, is much higher than we can afford as a country right now. We need to mobilize significant capital, including from the private sector, if we're going to be able to shift expenditure off the state to the private sector and ensure that we have productivity. I was very glad that he mentioned productivity as significantly as he did in his speech. He ticked all of the right boxes. We've seen the currency respond accordingly, but of course the proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating.
Kubano Gumbi is joining us now, Martin. She's got a ton of graphs in front of her. Kubano?
Martin, thanks for joining us today. Just a quick one to you. The minister outlining some information around how much infrastructure development is going to be, but he's not very clear on the timelines. And I know that's been a key concern for you as the business community. Your reaction?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We've now drafted people into the infrastructure office located within the presidency because it's clear that the skills and capabilities can be reinforced by capabilities and experience that we have in the private sector. But the reality is that we've said consistently that any infrastructure project needs to be both viable and sustainable. Indeed, it needs to be critical. There are large numbers, almost R1 trillion that was allocated to infrastructure in the budget. Much of that, by the way, public-private partnerships. Once again, it's going to take time to feed through. We'll have to see in the medium-term budget policy statement in October whether or not we've got the traction that we require, because at the moment it's more in the promise than in the reality that we're investing.
You spoke immediately. The first question we put to you, Martin, you answered with an answer around confidence. We're in a hopefully once-in-a-century event, certainly a once-in-a-lifetime event. When it comes to growing an economy, confidence is absolutely vital. The messaging, all of these things. Now, the Finance Minister may have hope for confidence. Thankfully, there were no plants on offer today. But do you believe that business people have reason to be confident when you consider the mixed messaging we get from the governing party and other political figures?
Well, Stephen, they want to be confident. That's absolutely for sure. The silver lining, if there is a silver lining in the pandemic, is the fact that I believe that business and government and other social partners have found one another in a manner that they haven't done previously, and recognize they need to harness all of the respective resources they have at their disposal if we're going to make sure that the economy can operate, as I said, at its full potential. But the reality is that that confidence is going to be predicated upon the implementation of fundamental structural reform. That's a conversation we've been having with the government since we tabled our proposals in July of last year in terms of an accelerated economic recovery strategy. Most of them have found their way through into the reconstruction and recovery plan. We're working hand in glove with government to see how that can take place. Perhaps the energy sector is going to be the first area where we find it. But again, these changes take significant time. I don't believe that we're going to be able to rely upon being given the benefit of the doubt anymore. The reality is that we're going to have to see a real delivery in the immediate short term, both in terms of capping expenditure that extends, for example, to state-owned enterprises. I think many people will be concerned and surprised to see that there's additional support being provided to SAA, although that's a requirement of the business rescue process. And at the same time, seeing where we can ensure that the private sector, when I say the private sector, I talk particularly and specifically about small and medium-sized enterprises, which are the key drivers for economic growth on a sustainable basis in any economy, and which are also absolutely essential to the inclusive growth that we're seeking as a country. And I need to also emphasize that the budget comes on the back of absolutely horrendous job figures that came through yesterday in terms of both narrow and broader unemployment, which is going to take an extensive and extended period of time to fix, and can only happen with the sort of inclusive, sustainable growth that we're talking about, predicated upon the implementation of fundamental reform.
All right, more on those unemployment figures as we go. Martin Kingston, many thanks, CEO of Business 4SA, and of course many other business hats that he wears as well. Kopano Gumbi, Ayabonga Kawa, they're going to stay with me in the studio. We're not letting them go anywhere. From 4 o'clock this afternoon, we expect the Finance Minister Tito Mboweni to answer questions. We'll bring that live to you as well. Stay with us. It's a special edition of Newsfeed.